And this one, we are going to be doing template inheritance, some basic template inheritance. And what that means is we just make our templates more dynamic. So in our views, what we've seen is this thing called return render, and it takes in a request, a template name, and context. Now it does more than just put the context into the template. It actually uses template variables and template blocks and template inheritance to make a more dynamic templating system. So to do this, we're just going to convert everything over into this templating system. So if we look at all of our HTML files, so index, post, as well as post form, what we see is a lot of like repetitive code that we have on here. Especially if we start putting a lot of CSS and JavaScript in there, or we use a framework like Bootstrap, you're going to start seeing a lot of repetitive code if we put it on each HTML document. This is terrible practice, not just in Django, but in modern programming languages in general, or modern web frameworks in general. You don't want to repeat yourself over and over and over again. So what we're going to do is create a new template in here, and we're going to call it base.html. So base is basically the parent template of every other template that we're going to be using with. You can have multiple parents. I'll show you what this means in just a second. But really, base is like the core of it. Base is going to be the main parent that we will use. And you're going to see this on other Django third-party projects or other Django projects in general. They'll use base.html instead of index.html. So let's go ahead and copy everything from index.html, and we're actually going to cut it out and paste it into base. And I'm going to delete index.html completely. So index.html is gone. We no longer have it anymore. All we're going to be using is base here. And inside of this body, I'm going to make a new div, and I'm going to call it div class equals to container. I'm just giving it a div class or a name for that div, and I'm going to close it out. Inside of this container, I'm going to make a new template block. So it's going to be called block content, and then we're going to put in block content. So the curly brackets percent block content, curly brackets, percent curly bracket. This is opening and closing a block that's going to be a replaceable block. So we can actually take content out of there and put new content in. You'll see this in action once we actually do the inheritance. So what I'm also going to do is I'm going to put this original code that we had in there inside of this block content stuff. And now back into our view, wherever we rendered index.html, we're going to render now base.html. And it's only in one place. So that's the list. So let's go ahead and take a look at the list. And if I refresh in here, nothing has changed. It looks exactly the same. So let's actually go into a new template. So let's say post form. And now instead of having all the doc type stuff, I'm going to get rid of everything here and say extends base.html. I'll explain what this does in a second. And then I'm going to get rid of all this other stuff. So now extends base.html is saying like, hey, base.html is going to be the parent. So in any of the blocks that we put below, those are going to be replaced with the content that we want, or we're going to do something with it basically. So extends base.html, if I saved it just like this and I went into post create, let's go ahead and look at it. Post create, all it says is working, right? So what it's thinking it's doing is it's really just using the base.html, and it's not actually changing any of the content. So in order for us to change the content, we have to use those blocks again. So block content and in block content. And if I save that and refresh in that page, the form is now rendered once again. And I can also do block.super. And what this will do is get the original content that's in the parent class block, which in this case it just says is working because we don't have the object list. But I could say p equals to parent page, parent template, and close that off, refresh in here. And we'll see that we can actually add that sort of content in. That's something you can play around with. But since we have this block, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. Since we have this block, we can do it on all of our other HTML types of things. So in this case, we have the parent content for this, but let's do it for the post detail. And more specifically, this messages part. I'm going to actually cut out the messages here, put it into the base, and I'm going to put a new div class in here, and I'm going to call it messages. Close off this div. paste in our new messages, and I'm going to cut out the if statement above it. So again, this is in the base.html. So this is the parent for all of our other templates. So now in post detail, all I have is the actual detail that's related to the post. So again, like what we did in post form, I'm going to go ahead and extends from base.html. And then I'm going to do block content. And then finally in block content. Now you might see it some places as in block. That's okay. It's completely okay. It's just basically saying in this block. In block content is just a little bit more verbose, so you can see what's going on. It's completely up to you on how you want to do that. Some developers say it's best practice to do it that way. Others, myself included, say it's not necessary because you shouldn't have that much content inside of your template anyway to really need in block content. Anyways, so now that we've got that, let's go ahead and take a look. And I'm going to create one. I'll say new item. Here we go. Create post, and it says successfully created. Awesome. So everything is working exactly the way we want it to. Post form, I'm going to get rid of that block super there. So now, as we see here, our HTML stuff is very, very basic. So let's make it a little bit better. I'm going to go into our base.html again, and I'm going to put in inside of the head document, I'm going to put in, or the head aspect of the HTML document, I'm going to put in a title tag here and say try Django 1.9, and we'll close this out. But I'm also going to put this into block head, and in block, actually we should call it head underscore title, so block head title in block. So now that I've got this, I'm going to go ahead and copy this right here. I'm going to save it, and let's go ahead and see what the title does anyway. So what that does is it changes the tab title. It just changes what that looks like. But if I copy this and bring it into our block post detail, I can actually use head title. I can first off say instance.title, and then I can put a slash and then do block super. So what that does for us is it shows us the title of the item or the article and then where it is, which is try Django 1.9. So that's some of the dynamicness of how this can happen. Now you can do this with styles as well. It doesn't have to just be something like title, but there's a few things that you might want to note here. Number one, the first thing is anything outside of these blocks will not be rendered. So if I said H1 high there above the block content or the inheriting block, we are not going to see it. So if I refresh, it doesn't show up. As soon as I put it in the block, it will show up. Perfect. So another thing, like I said, is you could do CSS. So if I came in here and did a style tag and closed off that style tag and then just added block style, I'm going to go ahead and just copy and paste here. So style and then the in block. I could literally copy this whole thing, including the HTML style tags. Again, those won't be rendered because they're outside of a block, but it's good for code completion inside of Sublime Text. So H1, and I say color equals to, let's say like 777, right? And I refresh in here, and now it gives me a new color. So those blocks are very dynamic and really, really good. Cool. So that's all we're going to do on template inheritance. There's definitely a lot of other things that you could do with template inheritance that we're just not getting into. But the big thing here is we now only have one HTML document that really handles everything. And what we also have is a way to display our messages and one location for pretty much anything that would be related to the documentation. There is one more thing that I want to do, and that is adding in post_list.html and putting this inside of there. So this block content that we had, I'm going to go ahead and copy this and just separate that out. So extends base.html, save that, and now I'm going to get rid of all this. So basically our main content container is now very clean. It doesn't have a whole lot of stuff in there. Messages, that one is not necessarily as clean, but it still looks pretty good. I will do one more thing to clean up messages as well, actually. And we're going to come back into our post list, and we're going to call this post underscore list.html now. So if I go back into my post, that shows up fine. The last thing is something that's really cool about templates as well, is you can use something called include. So I'm going to make a new file in here, and I'll call this messages display.html. And I'm going to come back into my base, and I'm going to cut out this entire if message statement. I'm going to paste it into messages.display. And now inside of this base.html, I can go include messages underscore display.html, save that, and I refresh. And now if I go ahead and create another one, it says not successfully created. I'll say hello there, new content, post now successfully created. Cool. So that means the message is there. And as you see, our base HTML template is actually really clean. If I get rid of all the extra spacing, we only see 15 lines of code here, but it renders out to being a lot more depending on where it is. So if we look at our view page source, we see that it does include all that HTML stuff every single time, which is something you definitely need. The last thing that I actually want to get rid of is this not successfully created if valid statement. So there we go. Cool. So now when we go to create something, it's not going to give us a message right off the bat. All right, so that's it for our templates. We're not going to come back to it. Again, the things that we did here are pretty cool. There's definitely a lot more that you can do, like I said, and that's where you'd want to take one of our other classes where we go into a lot more depth, such as the digital market. We go into a lot more depth there to actually build full projects using these templates and just making them better. So if you have any questions, let us know. Otherwise, let's keep going.